Okay, I'll be using the diet formula that Ms. Vaughn so graciously laid out for us. That's to my left. So if you wonder why I'm looking over, it's because I'm looking at that. And I also have my notes here if you're wondering why I'm looking down. So I'll be using the diet formula to explain my thoughts on both the two stories of the two schools and Miss Anna's notes from the field performance. So let's get started into that. So in the article, at least with the two students, a brief description of that, it's basically students from two different socioeconomic classes and schools, and some of them in a special program that go to the other school are all paired together to give a comparison of how their socioeconomic status influences them at these new schools and how the two schools are different, and some of the students at least have similarities despite their socioeconomic status. So yeah, they give their experiences briefly on that. Like some students say they feel, I guess, bougier because they go to that school, while some feel they're not fit for that school. An example being one of the students in the very beginning felt that they weren't fit and they ran off campus crying. And some of them, like the two baseball boys, they found a connection, although their status was very different. And at first it was kind of hard for them to get a feel for each other. They found a very common ground with baseball that did not influence their socioeconomic status. And not only did they talk about their social status, they also went on to talk about money and race, because that also played a pivotal role in how they connected with each other and paired and told each other stories while they were together. And then for notes from the field, Miss Anna's performance, it was weird. It was almost like what you're asking us to do with our everyday life performance. At least for the start, for all of it, she mimicked the people she was able to interview almost to a T, trying to give the exact voice. Even the questions they posed during the interview, it's like she had all this in her mind and said, I'm going to display everything that they said and asked of me. So in a way, it actually is like our everyday life performance and a form of dialogue engagement with Miss Anna. She is exactly performing what she heard from them in her interview and giving us that performance. That way we can build off of that. So to someone who's not seen it, I definitely say it's interesting, and it's almost like if you were talking to that person, you're getting the interview she got, basically. That's how I would describe that to another person. She's giving you the interview of the person she was talking to, and she's displaying that information. So interpretation. So as an audience member, how would I make sense of these performances? So I found it rather easy to make sense of the performances, because I'm an African American man myself. So at least with a lot of the first half of performances and being a black teen, I found it rather easy to see how sometimes you may not want to appeal to authority, or how how the guy who smashed the stuff and was sentenced to 12 years in prison, how he felt when she used the example when she said he was tired of being tired. I found it rather easy to connect to that myself. So I think this performance is constructed the way it is to not only to get you to think, but to also give you insight on how that person felt during the situation. So when I was watching, I thought it was constructed this way because it really made me think, okay, now I can see why some people do the things they do. Like when she was talking about how some kids don't like to appeal to authoritative figures, that made me think, because I was like, that makes sense. Or how people were tired of being tired. She basically went and attacked the system directly. Not only did she attack the police departments and how they govern us, but she also went and attacked the schools, the system, how we appeal to authoritative figures. So themes I see emerging are obviously things like the Black Lives Matter campaign, racial tensions between us, things of that nature. How do these stories connect to my own life experiences? Well, in my life experience, I have been in handcuffs 3 times for 3 crimes I did not commit, and went to court twice for 2 of them. So it was pretty easy, especially from the police brutality perspective, because when I was 13, they thought I did something I couldn't possibly do. And even though I had a complete alibi from my football team and coaches, they still came, took me out of my home, and were not the most cautious people about it. I'd say they were very rough. So from that, I'd say it was pretty easy to connect that, how the stories connected to my own life experiences. And my own experiences influenced these because while watching, it'd be a lie to say I was not angered by what I saw. They influenced me because it really makes me think, why do people treat my community this way? Or how can I better and help my community? Because at least with my experiences, I know police and authoritative figures are not always the most trusting or best people to ask help for or confront. So I'd say they influence how they influence and how I interpret these. It really helps build in my head, at least, so I get a better think. I'd say I think better not think better, but how I think about topics like police brutality and racial tensions between many of the different minorities in this country and white people, the majority. Okay, the evaluation. Was the performance effective? I think the performance was very effective because not only can she appeal to the people who were actually in the audience, her performance is very effective because if you were to go back and watch that, you say, oh, I'm seeing, I wouldn't say a different take, but you're seeing how you felt in that situation, really. Because it's one thing to evaluate it yourself. Like when the prison guy was talking, when she was the Tacos, I can't pronounce his last name, I'm sorry. But when she was displaying him, he almost contradicted himself in some of the things he said. And I feel when you get to see your performance from a different perspective, it often opens a new perspective on yours. Even though it's just a mimicry of you, you get a new perspective built off of what you already have from your situation. So I feel it definitely helped with that. So, and also not only did she effectively mimic them, but even the questions they asked, like when she was displaying I can't remember his name, the guy's name that started with an A that was sentenced to 12 months in prison, or Sanaya and Naya, when she was talking about them and displaying their story and how that went down. It was very effective because not only did you get it from their point of view, but when she put subtle questions, or when she kind of sarcastically said, did the cop need to do all that, or stuff like that, it really made me think, like, wow, that doesn't make sense. Was that amount of force really needed for that little girl? So it makes you think. And you get it she's telling it from the actual peoples it happens to perspective in most cases in the video. So you get it from their perspective. So I say it's very effective to make you think. You definitely, after watching the video, you won't walk out. After watching Notes in the Field, you won't walk out or close the tab saying, oh, I didn't get anything from this. You get something from that, regardless whether it's just you notice there is actual racial tensions in our country, or police brutality is really a thing, or the school systems black school systems, specifically black hoods, neighborhoods, black schools, aren't getting the same amount of money or tuition, funneling, whatever you want to call it, that other schools do get. So I definitely say it makes you think. As far as the value in this style performance, I honestly think it should be used more. It was very interesting. It made me think. So I'd say the value in this style performance is while it's odd, it's very high because it's a mimic of a person, of who you are. I'm not who you are, but the person being interviewed, and you get it from their perspective. So how am I practicing everyday life performance foster empathy? It fosters empathy not only because you're actually putting yourself in their shoes. A very strong principle in empathy, to put yourself in someone's shoes. So it definitely fosters empathy because she's putting herself in their shoes. So not only does she feel empathy, but the crowd, the audience, anyone, whoever the audience is that she's talking to, also feels empathy. The person that is hearing their own story again also has to empathize with themselves when they're hearing it, because you might see it from a different perspective now. You might learn something. And also the crowd that she actually performed in front of, they seeing it from that interview, it's like they're interviewing her and she's giving them an interview back. She's answering questions. So it almost like that, yeah, you foster a lot of empathy. So ethical questions the performer should consider to the stories. The only real ethical things you walk away with, in my opinion, were the topics of police brutality, racial tensions, the school systems, the system itself. And I personally liked all these examples. I think she did a great job of displaying police brutality, our schooling systems, our prison system. I think she attacked the system very well. It is very thought-provoking when you think about some of the things she said. Like, special education does need funding, but there are black neighborhoods and schools that need a lot of funding that aren't getting that funding. So a lot of these kids aren't able to go to places like Great College, Johns Hopkins, as she said, places like those. You're not really seeing a lot of that. And then how do these examples, so as far as theorize and connect, so you get a lot of dialogical engagement in this because it's with your own, but another's form of aesthetic communication through the means of performance, which is exactly what she was doing. But at least from the article's perspective, you get a lot of empathy coming from that. There's a lot of empathy between the students and how they share their comparisons and similarities, and how some of them try to be empathetic to other situations. I'd say in that way, the article is very empathetic. The main theme from that is building empathy. But as far as the everyday life, not everyday life performance, the notes and fields, which is very similar to our everyday life performance, the dynamic nature of the story she told contributes to the power they have on other people. So everything that happened dynamically in those stories contributes to how an audience may take that. And not only does her narration and her mimicking of them, it influences how you think about the story. Yeah, it influences how you think about the stories. And one more thing that I honestly did walk away with that I wrote down in my notes is stories are communal and shape your own community. So in that way, the stories that we heard when she told us, the interviews and the stories, they shape how we think now. Like, it actually, like I said earlier, when I was talking about provoking your thought process, it is shaping your thought process, everything that she said. So I find that very interesting. But what was the most interesting out of everything was the process that she did that we learned in chapter, I'm pretty sure it was chapter 4, I believe. Yeah. She went through the steps of recognition, convergence, and adoption. She listened to all the people, she listened to all those interviews and adopted those stories. And not only did she sympathize with them and show empathy, she adopted them as her own and then mimicked them back out to the crowd. And I'd say that's very, it connects back to a lot of the things we talked in class. I know that much. So how does this all connect to larger social and cultural issues? Well, I'll say, as far as the things we learned in class, as far as her performance and the article, it connects back with empathy for a lot of our cultures, because some cultures don't understand exactly all of the anguish that goes along with racial tensions, the system, schooling, things of that nature. So I'd say, as far as empathy and the process of recognition, convergence, and adoption, I'd say those really connect to a lot of social problems, because if other people went through these steps, like one would in a performance, which makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, in a performance, when you go through all these steps in a performance, it's just like going through all these steps in real life, or not real life, I'm gonna say in the situation that's going on. Like, as far as Black Lives Matter, if you go through all these steps, it provokes your thought process and you start to think about things on a different level. But I'd say in both the stories, you can connect them through these processes and dialogical engagement.